She was sitting in seat 1, minding her own business when the flight attendant decided to make the biggest mistake of her career. Brenda looked at the young black woman in first class and saw a trespasser. She didn't see the designer hoodie, the platinum ticket, or the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are. Brenda threatened to call the police. She threatened to drag her off the plane in handcuffs. But when the officers finally rushed down the aisle, it wasn't the passenger who ended up shaking in fear. It was Brenda. Because when that security badge accidentally dropped, the entire power dynamic shifted in a split second. You won't believe who she really was. The early morning fog still clung to the tarmac at JFK International Airport as passengers began to shuffle toward Gate B32. It was a transatlantic flight to London Heathrow, the kind of route frequented by tired executives, eager tourists, and the quietly wealthy who preferred to sleep through the crossing. Jordan Banks adjusted the strap of her leather weekender bag on her shoulder. At 28, Jordan had the kind of face that made people underestimate her. She wore a slate-grey cashmere tracksuit that looked comfortable but cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her hair was pulled back in long, neat braids. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to sleep. She approached the priority boarding lane. The gate agent, a tired-looking man named Gary, scanned her boarding pass without looking up. The machine beeped green. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Banks. Seat 1A. Gary mumbled, handing the pass back. "Thanks, Gary," Jordan said, offering a polite nod before heading down the jet bridge. The air inside the plane was cool and smelled faintly of sanitized leather. Jordan stepped into the first-class cabin. It was largely empty. She was one of the first to board. She moved toward seat 1A, the prime spot by the window, offering maximum privacy. Standing near the galley was the lead flight attendant. Her name tag read Brenda. She had blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of stiffness and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was arranging champagne flutes with aggressive precision. As Jordan stepped into the first-class section, Brenda's head snapped up. Her eyes did a quick judgmental scan from Jordan's sneakers to her braids. The smile vanished instantly. "Excuse me, miss," Brenda said, her voice sharp and loud enough to echo in the quiet cabin. "Economy boarding is actually through the second door, or you can pass through here, but you need to keep moving. You're blocking the aisle." Jordan paused, her hand resting on the back of seat 1A. She was used to this. It happened at fancy restaurants, at luxury car dealerships, and sadly, it happened here. "I'm not heading to economy," Jordan said calmly, her voice even. "I'm in 1A. Brenda let out a short, dismissive scoff. She abandoned the champagne flutes and marched over, blocking Jordan's path to the seat. She crossed her arms over her chest, her posture radiating authority. "Let me see your ticket," Brenda demanded, extending a hand, but not waiting for a response. "Now." Jordan sighed internally. She didn't have the energy for a confrontation, but she reached into her pocket and pulled out the boarding pass. She held it out. Brenda snatched it. She stared at it, her brow furrowing as if she were trying to decode a complex riddle. Jordan Banks, 1A, first class. The bold letters were undeniable. But Brenda wasn't looking for confirmation. She was looking for a flaw. "This doesn't look right," Brenda muttered, flipping the paper over. "The system has been glitching all morning. We've had people upgrading themselves fraudulently. I bought that ticket 3 weeks ago," Jordan said, her patience thinning by a fraction. "Through the corporate portal. It's valid." Brenda looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Corporate portal. Who do you work for? This is a $5,000 seat, miss, usually reserved for CEOs and partners. I know how much the seat costs, Jordan replied, stepping around Brenda to place her bag in the overhead bin. And who I work for is irrelevant. The ticket is paid for. Don't you walk away from me, Brenda snapped, grabbing Jordan's forearm. The cabin went silent. A businessman in seat 2B, who had just settled in, lowered his newspaper. Touching a passenger was a major violation, and Jordan froze. She looked down at Brenda's hand on her arm, then slowly up to Brenda's face. I suggest you let go of my arm, Jordan said. Her voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a scream. It was a warning. The kind of warning that usually made smart people back down. Brenda, however, was not feeling smart today. She was feeling powerful. She released Jordan's arm, but stepped closer, invading her personal space. You listen to me, Brenda hissed. I don't know how you got this ticket. Maybe you stole it. Maybe you hacked the app. I don't care. But I run this cabin. I know our clientele, and you do not fit the profile. So I'm going to ask you once, take your bag and move to the back, or I'm going to have you removed. Jordan didn't blink. She placed her bag in the bin and sat down in 1A, buckling her seatbelt with a deliberate click. Do what you have to do, Brenda, Jordan said, opening a file on her tablet. But I'm not moving. By the time the rest of the passengers had boarded, the tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to choke on. Brenda had spent the entire boarding process ignoring Jordan. She offered champagne to the man in 2B, Mr. Henderson, a hedge fund manager, who looked uncomfortable with the scene he had witnessed. She took the coat of the woman in 1B, but she pointedly skipped seat 1A. Jordan didn't care about the champagne. She was reviewing a digital briefing regarding a security breach at a cargo facility in Hamburg. She was focused. However, Brenda wasn't done. She was fuming in the galley, whispering aggressively to a younger flight attendant. Sarah. Sarah looked terrified, glancing nervously at Jordan and shaking her head. I'm telling you it's fraud, Brenda whispered loudly. I've seen it before. These scammers get hold of miles accounts. I'm not having it on my flight. Brenda, just let it go, Sarah pleaded quietly. She has a valid boarding pass. The gate agent cleared her. Gary is an idiot, Brenda snapped. Watch this. Brenda marched back down the aisle. The plane doors were about to close. This was her last chance to exert control before takeoff. She stopped at row 1. Ma'am, Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that barely covered the malice. I need to check your bag again. Jordan looked up from her tablet. My bag is in the overhead. It's fine. No, it's not, Brenda lied. It's too large for the first-class bins. It's a safety hazard. We need to check it to the hold. Jordan glanced at the bin. Her bag was a standard weekender, significantly smaller than Mr. Henderson's hard-shell roller in the adjacent bin. It fits perfectly, Brenda. It's smaller than the gentleman's bag across from me. His bag is compliant. Yours is not, Brenda said. Now hand it over, or do we have a problem? I have sensitive documents in that bag, Jordan stated firmly. It stays with me. That is federal regulation regarding the transport of sensitive materials. Brenda laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. Federal regulation. Oh, honey, please. What do you have in there? Top secret rap lyrics. Don't make me laugh. Give me the bag. Mr. Henderson in 2B cleared his throat. Excuse me, miss. Her bag is fine. There's plenty of room. Brenda spun around, her face flushing red. Sir, please do not interfere with flight crew instructions. This is a matter of aviation safety. She turned back to Jordan. Last chance. Hand over the bag or you get off the plane." Jordan unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She was taller than Brenda, and she stood with a military-grade posture. "I am not checking the bag, and I am not getting off this plane. If you have a legitimate safety concern, call the captain. Otherwise, go do your job and get me a sparkling water." Brenda's mouth fell open. The disrespect, the audacity. She pressed the call button for the cockpit violently. "That's it," Brenda screeched. "I'm calling the police. You are aggressive, you are non-compliant, and I feel threatened. You are going to jail." She stormed toward the cockpit door and hammered on it. The heavy door clicked open, and Captain Miller, a grey-haired veteran pilot with a stern face, stepped out, looking annoyed. "What is going on out here, Brenda?" "We are missing our slot," the captain barked. "Captain, this passenger in 1A is refusing crew instructions. She's being aggressive, and she assaulted me." Brenda lied, pointing a shaking finger at Jordan. "I want her off this flight. I am not closing these doors until she is gone." "Captain." Miller looked at Jordan, who was standing calmly by her seat. He looked at Brenda, who was hyperventilating with rage. "Assault?" the captain asked, raising an eyebrow. "She grabbed me," Brenda shouted. "And she's likely carrying stolen goods. She claims to have sensitive documents. It's a threat." "Captain." Captain Miller sighed. He didn't want paperwork, but an accusation of assault and a threat to the aircraft was serious. He had to follow protocol. "Miss," the captain said to Jordan, his voice serious. "Did you touch this flight attendant?" "No, Captain," Jordan said. "She grabbed my arm during boarding. I asked her to remove it. I haven't left my seat area." "Liar!" Brenda screamed. "She's a liar. Get the police now." The captain rubbed his temples. "I have to call Port Authority. Protocol requires us to clear the threat. Everyone stays seated." He went back into the cockpit to radio the tower. Brenda smirked at Jordan. It was a look of pure, toxic victory. "You're done," Brenda whispered. "Hope you like prison food." Jordan just sat back down. She reached into her pocket, not for a phone, but to check the position of the leather wallet inside her jacket. She didn't say a word. She just waited. 15 minutes later, the plane was still at the gate. The air conditioning was off, and the cabin was getting stuffy. Murmurs of annoyance rippled through the plane. Why are we waiting? Some drama in first class. Someone attacked a stewardess. The rumors were already twisting the truth. Then the jet bridge door opened. 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department boarded the aircraft. They were big men, wearing tactical vests, their hands resting near their belts. Leading them was Sergeant O'Malley, a man who looked like he'd seen it all and had no patience for any of it. Brenda rushed to them immediately, playing the victim perfectly. She clasped her hands together, her voice trembling. "Oh, thank God you're here, officers. It's her." She pointed an accusatory finger at Jordan. "She's dangerous. She refused to check her bag. She became belligerent, and when I tried to reason with her, she shoved me. I'm terrified for the safety of this flight." Sergeant O'Malley nodded, his face grim. "Assault on a flight crew member is a federal offense, ma'am. We'll handle it." The 3 officers marched down the short aisle of first class. They surrounded seat 1A. The atmosphere was heavy with impending violence. Mr. Henderson in 2B looked away, unable to watch. "Ma'am," Sergeant O'Malley boomed, looming over Jordan. "Stand up! Hands where I can see them!" Jordan didn't flinch. She slowly closed her tablet and placed it in the seat pocket. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Turn around," O'Malley ordered, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "You are being detained for interference with a flight crew and assault." "I didn't assault anyone," Jordan said calmly. And if you check the cameras or ask the witnesses. Save it for the judge, O'Malley interrupted. Turn around, now. Brenda was standing behind the police, a smug grin plastered on her face. She pulled out her personal phone and started recording. Say goodbye to your freedom, sweetie, she muttered. One of the junior officers reached out and grabbed Jordan's shoulder to spin her around. The movement was rough. As he jerked her around, Jordan's blazer swung open. The inner pocket of her jacket was loose. Gravity took over. A black leather wallet slid out of her inner pocket. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, flipping open as it landed. It didn't look like a normal wallet. It had a heavy metallic weight to it. The gold badge gleamed under the harsh cabin lights. The eagle, the shield. The bold blue lettering was unmistakable to anyone in law enforcement. Department of Homeland Security, Internal Affairs. Special Agent in Charge. The junior officer froze. He looked at the badge. Then he looked at Jordan. Then back at the badge. Sarge, the officer whispered, his voice cracking. Sergeant O'Malley looked down. His eyes went wide. He recognized that badge. That wasn't just a cop badge. That was a badge that could end careers. That was a badge that investigated corruption. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Jordan looked at the officer who was gripping her shoulder. Officer, she said, her voice like ice. You are currently touching a federal agent who is on active assignment. I suggest you remove your hand before you lose it. The officer snatched his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. Brenda, who couldn't see the badge from her angle, was confused. What are you waiting for? She screeched. Cuff her! Drag her out! Jordan bent down slowly. She picked up the badge wallet. She dusted it off and held it up, flipping it open so Brenda could see it clearly. Brenda Miller, Jordan said, reading the flight attendant's name tag again. I believe you called the police on a federal officer. Brenda squinted at the gold shield. Her face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Brenda stammered. Officer O'Malley, Jordan said, turning her attention to the police sergeant. She didn't need to ask his name. She read it off his uniform. I am Special Agent Jordan Banks. I am currently conducting a covert audit of airline security protocols regarding VIP transport. And do you know what I just found? O'Malley swallowed hard. No, ma'am. I found a flight attendant who fabricates federal crimes, Jordan said, her eyes boring into Brenda. Filing a false police report, interfering with a federal agent, and attempted deprivation of civil rights under color of authority. Jordan took a step toward Brenda. Brenda took a stumbling step back, hitting the galley wall. You wanted the police, Brenda? Jordan asked softly. Well, they're here, but they aren't here for me. Jordan turned to O'Malley. Sergeant, take a statement from Mr. Henderson in Seat 2B regarding the alleged assault. Then I want this flight attendant removed from the aircraft immediately. Wait, Brenda cried out, tears suddenly streaming down her face. I didn't know who you were. It was just a mistake. No, Jordan said. If I had been a nurse or a teacher or just a student, you would have ruined my life today. You didn't care who I was. You only cared about what you thought I was. Jordan looked at the captain, who was standing in the cockpit doorway, looking horrified. Captain, Jordan said, I assume you have a relief flight attendant available because Brenda is going to be busy answering questions at the precinct. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted from tense silence to a chaotic, murmuring storm. Passengers from economy were craning their necks, trying to see what was happening up front. Phones were raised camera lenses poking through the gaps in the seats like hungry mechanical eyes. Sergeant O'Malley turned slowly from Jordan to Brenda. His demeanor had completely changed. He was no longer the aggressive enforcer. He was now a man realizing he had almost stepped into a career-ending bear trap. He looked at Brenda with a mixture of anger and disgust. Police officers hate being used as pawns, especially in petty personal vendettas. "Ms. Miller," O'Malley said, his voice low and dangerous, "you stated on a recorded 911 line, and to the captain that this passenger assaulted you. You claimed she shoved you." Brenda was trembling so hard, her teeth were chattering. The invincible armor of her uniform had shattered. "I felt threatened," she stammered, her eyes darting around the cabin looking for an ally. She looked at Captain Miller, but he was staring at the floor, distancing himself from the blast radius. She was aggressive, her tone, her attitude. "Attitude is not assault, Ms. Miller," Jordan interjected smoothly. She remained standing, her posture relaxed but commanding. She turned to the man in seat 2B. "Mr. Henderson, was it? You have been here since I boarded. Did you see me touch this woman?" Mr. Henderson, the hedge fund manager, adjusted his glasses. He was a man who understood risk management, and backing Brenda was now a toxic asset. He cleared his throat. "Officer," Henderson said, his voice clear. The young lady in 1A never left her personal space. The flight attendant grabbed her arm initially. When the flight attendant demanded the bag, the passenger refused but remained seated. There was absolutely no physical contact initiated by the passenger. The assault claim is, frankly, it's a fabrication. O'Malley nodded. He pulled a notepad from his pocket. "And the threat. Did she make verbal threats?" "She asked for a sparkling water," Henderson said dryly. O'Malley let out a long breath through his nose. He turned back to Brenda. She was backed against the galley wall near the coffee machines. "Brenda Miller," O'Malley announced. The recitation of the Miranda rights began. But this time, they weren't for Jordan. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "What?" Brenda shrieked. "You can't arrest me. I'm the flight lead. I have a flight to work. Captain, tell them." Captain Miller finally looked up. His face was pale. "Brenda, you lied to me. You compromised the safety of the flight by bringing armed officers on board under false pretenses. I can't have you on this aircraft." "Turn around," O'Malley ordered, pulling the handcuffs from his belt, the same handcuffs he had intended for Jordan just minutes ago. "No. No, please." Brenda sobbed, her hands flailing. "It was a mistake. I'm sorry, Miss Banks. Please, I'm sorry." Jordan watched impassively. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply watched justice take its mechanical course. "It's Special Agent Banks," she corrected softly. "And an apology doesn't unring the bell, Brenda. You wanted to weaponize the police against me because you didn't think I belonged in your first-class cabin. Now you're going to see the inside of a holding cell. I think you'll fit in just fine there." The click of the handcuffs locking around Brenda's wrists was the loudest sound in the plane. O'Malley and his partner grabbed Brenda by the arms. They weren't gentle. She had wasted resources and embarrassed them. They marched her down the aisle. As they passed Jordan, Brenda looked up, mascara running down her cheeks, her face a mask of ruin. "I'll lose my job," she whispered hoarsely. "You should have thought about that before you tried to take my freedom," Jordan replied. The walk of shame was brutal. As Brenda was escorted out of first class and through the galley door, the passengers who had seen the commotion began to boo. Someone shouted, "Karen!" The video of a flight attendant being dragged off her own plane in handcuffs was uploaded to Twitter before Brenda even reached the jet bridge. Once she was gone, the cabin was eerily quiet. Sergeant O'Malley turned to Jordan. "Agent Banks, I apologize for the misunderstanding. We were acting on the information provided." "I know, Sergeant," Jordan said, tucking her badge back into her pocket. "But next time, maybe ask for a witness statement before you threaten to cuff a passenger. Bias is a blindfold, officer. Don't wear it." "Yes, ma'am," O'Malley said, looking chastened. "Will you be continuing on the flight?" Jordan looked at her seat, then at the captain. "Captain," Jordan asked, "is this flight going to be cancelled? We have a reserve crew member on standby at the airport, actually," Captain Miller said, eager to salvage the situation. "We can be airborne in 45 minutes. We would be honored to have you fly with us, Agent Banks. Please, let us make this right." Jordan considered it. She picked up her bag, the bag that had started it all, and sat back down in 1A. "I have a meeting in London tomorrow," Jordan said calmly. "I'll stay, but I'll need that sparkling water now." Sarah, the junior flight attendant who had tried to warn Brenda, rushed forward, her hands shaking slightly. "Right away, Agent Banks, right away." The flight to London was smooth, but the turbulence on the ground was just beginning. While Jordan sipped champagne in seat 1, watching the clouds roll by a storm, was brewing at the airline's headquarters in Dallas. The video of Brenda's arrest had gone viral. It had 3 million views in 4 hours. The hashtag Flying While Black and hashtag Agent Banks were trending globally. By the time the plane touched down at Heathrow, the story wasn't just about a rude flight attendant. It was a PR nightmare of catastrophic proportions. Jordan didn't turn her phone on immediately upon landing. She walked through the jet bridge, refreshed and ready for her actual work. But as she stepped into the terminal, she saw a man in a sharp navy suit holding a placard. It didn't have her name on it. It just said, "EIP Services." He spotted her immediately. The description of the woman in the grey cashmere tracksuit had been circulated to every station manager in the network. He hurried over, sweating, despite the air conditioning. "Agent Banks, Ms. Banks," the man said, breathless. "I'm Robert Sterling, the Regional Vice President for the airline here in the UK. Welcome to London." Jordan stopped adjusting her bag. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't request a greeting committee." We know," Sterling said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "But the CEO, our headquarters, everyone is aware of the incident at JFK. It is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. We wanted to personally apologize and escort you through customs." Jordan looked at him with a cool detachment. "The incident wasn't unacceptable, Mr. Sterling. It was illegal. Your employee committed a felony." "Yes, of course, and she has been suspended pending investigation," Sterling said quickly, trying to guide her toward a private VIP lane. "Please come this way. We have a car waiting for you." Jordan didn't move. "Suspended." "She was arrested, Mr. Sterling, and I've already filed a formal complaint with the Department of Homeland Security regarding the misuse of emergency protocols by your staff. This triggers an automatic federal audit of your hiring and training practices." Sterling turned pale. A federal audit? That could cost the airline millions in fines, grounded flights, and retraining mandates. "Agent Banks," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We understand your frustration. We truly do. But surely we can handle this. Internally, the airline is prepared to offer significant compensation. We're talking lifetime first-class status as settlement for the emotional distress. We can write a check today." He was trying to buy her off. Jordan smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she said, leaning in, "do you know what my department does?" "Internal affairs," Sterling muttered. "Specifically, I investigate corruption And the abuse of power, Jordan clarified. I investigate people who think rules don't apply to them because they have a badge or a title or a checkbook. You offering me money to drop a federal investigation that's dangerously close to bribery. Sterling recoiled, realizing he had just dug the hole deeper. No, I merely meant as a gesture of goodwill. Keep your goodwill, Jordan said, stepping around him. I don't want your money. I want accountability. I want to know why a woman like Brenda felt comfortable enough to threaten a passenger with prison just because she didn't like the way I looked. That's a culture problem, mister. Sterling, and checks don't fix culture. She walked past him, heading toward the regular customs line. Wait, Sterling called out. What are you going to do? Jordan didn't look back. I'm going to finish my trip. Then I'm going back to New York to testify against Brenda. And then I'm coming for your training department. Meanwhile, back in New York, the reality of hard karma was hitting Brenda Miller with the force of a freight train. She was sitting in a holding cell at the Queens County Central Booking. Her uniform was wrinkled, her mascara was smeared, and her shoes had been taken away. The cell smelled of bleach and despair. She had used her one phone call to call her union representative, a tired man named Gary. Ironically, the same name as the gate agent she had insulted. Gary, you have to get me out, Brenda cried into the receiver. It's all a misunderstanding. She's crazy. Brenda, shut up and listen. Gary's voice was harsh on the other end. I've seen the video. Everyone has seen the video. You didn't just harass a passenger. You harassed a federal agent. The union isn't going to touch this. Brenda felt her stomach drop. That's what I pay dues for. You have to defend me. We defend against unjust termination, Gary explained. We don't defend against felonies caught on camera. The airline has already started termination proceedings. You're fired, Brenda, effective immediately. Fired? Brenda whispered. But I have 20 years. And you threw it all away because you couldn't check a ticket without being a racist, Gary said bluntly. And it gets worse. The district attorney is looking to make an example out of this, filing a false report in the first degree. Unlawful imprisonment. They're talking about jail time, Brenda. Actual time. But she was wearing a tracksuit. Brenda blurted out, her defense sounding pathetic even to her own ears. She didn't look like she belonged. That's the problem, Brenda. Gary said, his voice final. She belonged more than you did. You're on your own. Don't call me again. The line went dead. Brenda slowly lowered the phone. She looked around the cell. There was no first class here. No power. No authority. She was just another inmate in a concrete box. She sat on the metal bench and put her head in her hands. She thought about Jordan Banks. She thought about the calm way the woman had held up that gold badge. Brenda realized for the first time in her life that she wasn't the protagonist of the story. She was the villain, and the villain always loses in the end. But the story wasn't over yet. The legal system was just warming up, and Jordan Banks wasn't the only one coming for her. The internet detectives had found Brenda's social media, and they were digging up a history that proved this wasn't her first time targeting a minority passenger. The floodgates were open, and in London, Jordan Banks checked into her hotel. She turned on the TV. The news was playing the clip of her badge drop on a loop. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Director," Jordan said when the other end picked up. "Agent Banks," the voice of the DHS director boomed. "You've had an interesting flight." "You could say that," Jordan replied. "The airline is trying to settle. They're scared." "Good," the director said. "The audit is approved. We're going to turn that airline inside out. How do you want to proceed with the flight attendant? Jordan walked to the window, looking out over the London skyline. She wants a plea deal, Jordan said. Her lawyer called me 5 minutes ago. She's offering a public apology and community service. What did you tell them? I told them no, Jordan said, her voice hard as steel. I told them we're going to trial. 6 months later, the atmosphere inside the federal district court in Brooklyn was thick enough to choke on. The air conditioning system was fighting a losing battle against the heat of 300 bodies packed into the mahogany-paneled room. It wasn't just a trial anymore. United States versus. Brenda Miller had become a carnival. Reporters lined the back walls, sketching furiously. Civil rights activists sat in the gallery wearing T-shirts that read, Seat 1A. Brenda sat at the defense table, and the transformation was nothing short of shocking. The woman who had once ruled her first-class cabin with an iron fist and a sneer was gone. In her place sat a ghost. Brenda wore a shapeless beige cardigan that washed out her pale skin. Her roots were showing a dark inch of grey, reclaiming the bottle blonde. She wouldn't look at the gallery. She stared at her hands, her fingers twisting a tissue until it shredded into white confetti on the table. Next to her sat Alan Finch, her defense attorney. He was the most expensive lawyer in the state, hired by liquidating Brenda's 401k and taking a second mortgage on her house. Finch was a shark in a $3,000 suit. He smelled of expensive cologne and confidence. He leaned over to Brenda, whispering in her ear, "Keep your head down. Look sympathetic. We are going to paint her as the aggressor. We are going to make the jury wonder why a federal agent was hiding her badge." Brenda nodded weakly. She was terrified. "The defense calls Special Agent Jordan Banks to the stand," Finch announced, his voice booming. The heavy wooden doors swung open. Jordan Banks walked down the center aisle. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a gladiator entering the arena. She wore a sharp navy blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a severe professional bun. Her expression was unreadable. She stepped into the witness box, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Finch didn't waste time. He paced back and forth in front of the jury box, playing to the audience. "Agent Banks," Finch began, smiling with too many teeth. "Let's go back to that morning at JFK. You boarded the plane. You were asked to move. You refused. Eventually, police were called. My question is simple. Why didn't you just show your badge at the door?" Jordan adjusted the microphone. "I was traveling as a private citizen, Mr. Finch. I was on a commercial flight, not a tactical raid. There was no operational need to identify myself as law enforcement." "No operational need." Finch chuckled, turning to the jury with a mock look of confusion. "Ms. Banks, my client, was clearly distressed. She was worried about flight safety. If you had simply flashed that gold shield in the beginning, none of this would have happened. Isn't that true? If your client had treated me like a human being, none of this would have happened," Jordan replied, her voice cool and steady. Finch stopped pacing. He leaned on the railing of the witness stand, invading her space. "But you could have de-escalated it. Instead, you sat there. You waited. You let her dig a hole, didn't you? You wanted a confrontation. You wanted to flex your federal authority against a working-class woman who was just trying to do her job." A murmur ran through the courtroom. It was a dirty tactic, classic victim blaming. But Finch was selling it well. He was trying to make Jordan look like a bully who had set a trap. Jordan didn't blink. "Mr. Finch, I followed every lawful instruction given to me. I showed my ticket. I sat in my seat. I remained quiet. If your client requires a badge to treat a passenger with basic dignity, that is a character flaw, not a procedural error on my part. "Objection!" Finch shouted, sensing he was losing the handle. "The witness is being argumentative." "Overruled," the judge said, peering over her glasses. "You asked the question, counselor. She answered it." Finch flushed red. He retreated to his table, shuffling his papers. He realized he couldn't intimidate Jordan, so he decided to pivot. He needed to prove that Brenda made an honest mistake, not a malicious one. If it was a mistake, it wasn't a felony. "Let's talk about intent," Finch said, softening his voice. "My client, Ms. Miller, has worked in the skies for 20 years. She testified that she felt threatened. She testified that she thought your bag was a security risk. Can you prove, Agent Banks, beyond a reasonable doubt that she was acting out of hate? Or is it possible, just possible, that she was simply a stressed employee, making a bad judgment call?" This was the danger zone. The jury looked at Brenda. She wiped a tear from her cheek, looking small and pathetic. Reasonable doubt was creeping into the room. If the jury believed Brenda was just stressed, she might walk free. Jordan looked at the prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Ross. They exchanged a subtle nod. "Actually," Jordan said, turning her gaze directly to Brenda, "I believe the nature of her intent is quite clear, and I believe the prosecution has new evidence to clarify that exact point." Finch froze. What evidence discovery is closed? David Ross stood up from the prosecution table. He held a small USB drive in his hand. "Your Honor," Ross said, his voice cutting through the tension, "at 8:00 a.m. this morning, the FBI cyber forensics team successfully bypassed the encryption on the defendant's personal cell phone, which was seized as evidence upon her arrest. We have recovered a text message thread sent from the galley of the aircraft." Brenda's head snapped up. Her face went from pale to a sickly, ghostly grey. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Objection! Surprise evidence! This is a trial by ambush!" Finch yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "The evidence was emailed to defense counsel 20 minutes ago, Mr. Finch," the judge said dryly. "If you hadn't been so busy posturing for the jury, you might have seen it. Mr. Ross, proceed." The courtroom went deadly silent. Ross nodded to the court technician. A large screen descended from the ceiling. "These messages," Ross explained, "were sent by the defendant, Brenda Miller, to her husband at 10:14 a.m. This is exactly 5 minutes before she called the police, claiming to be assaulted." The projector hummed to life. The text bubbles appeared on the screen, magnified for everyone to see. Brenda, 10:14 a.m. Ugh. Another one in first class. Hoodrat in a tracksuit. Probably a rapper's girlfriend or a drug dealer. "I'm not dealing with this today." A gasp rippled through the gallery. The racial coding was undeniable. But it was the next messages that sealed her fate. Husband, 10:15 a.m. Just ignore her, babe. Don't make a scene. Brenda, 10:16 a.m. Number, I'm going to make her move. If she gives me any lip, I'm calling the cops. I'm going to get this thug dragged off my plane in cuffs. Watch this. It's going to be funny. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Finch slowly sat down. He closed his folder. He rubbed his temples. He knew in that second that his fee just wasn't worth it. There was no spinning this. This wasn't fear. This wasn't a safety concern. This wasn't a stressed employee. This was a premeditated plan to weaponize law enforcement against a minority passenger for entertainment. Jordan Banks leaned into the microphone. She looked at the screen, then at Brenda. "I'm going to get this thug dragged off my plane." Jordan read the text aloud, her voice ringing with icy clarity. "It's going to be funny." Jordan turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, when the police stormed that plane, with hands on their weapons ready to use lethal force because of a false report, Brenda Miller wasn't scared. She was laughing. She thought destroying my life would be funny." Brenda let out a strangled sob. She put her head on the table and began to cry ugly, heaving sobs that echoed in the quiet room. But nobody in the gallery moved to comfort her. Even the jury members looked away disgusted. "I have no further questions for this witness," Finch whispered, staring at his shoes. "The prosecution rests," Ross said firmly. As Jordan stepped down from the witness stand, she passed the defense table. She stopped for a brief second. Brenda looked up, her eyes red and swollen, pleading for some kind of mercy. Jordan didn't say a word. She just adjusted her blazer, smoothed out an invisible crease, and walked back to her seat. The click of her heels on the floor sounded like the ticking of a clock running out of time. The jury didn't need a long deliberation. They didn't even need lunch. They were back in 45 minutes. As the foreman stood up to read the verdict, Brenda Miller finally realized the truth. The badge hadn't destroyed her. The police hadn't destroyed her. The text message hadn't destroyed her. She had destroyed herself the moment she looked at another human being and decided they were less than her. And now the bill was due. The sentencing hearing arrived on a Tuesday that felt heavy with rain and inevitability. The federal district court in Brooklyn was suffocatingly full. The air smelled of wet wool and nervous sweat. For Brenda Miller, the weeks leading up to this moment had been a blur of frantic meetings with lawyers who wouldn't look her in the eye and friends who had stopped returning her calls. She stood before the bench, her legs trembling so violently that the fabric of her beige trousers shook. She looked small. The power she had wielded in the first-class cabin, the ability to command, to dismiss, to threaten, was completely gone. Here she was, just case number 24, CR 892. The judge, the Honorable Justice Halloway, was a woman known for her impatience with abuses of power. She adjusted her glasses, peering down at Brenda over a mountain of paperwork. The silence in the room was so absolute, you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Brenda Miller," Justice Halloway began, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "I have reviewed the evidence, including the text messages recovered by the FBI. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of assault and public disturbance. But this is different." The judge leaned forward. "You held a position of public trust. You were a safety officer in the sky. Passengers rely on you for their lives. Instead, you used your authority to terrorize a paying passenger, a federal agent no less, simply because her appearance offended your personal biases. You weaponized the police force. You wasted taxpayer resources. You risked the safety of an N2 aircraft to satisfy your own ego." Brenda gripped the defense table. "I made a mistake, Your Honor. I was stressed. Please, I have children." "You didn't think about your children when you tried to send an innocent woman to Rikers Island." The judge snapped her voice, cutting through Brenda's sob story like a knife. "You tried to deprive Jordan Banks of her liberty. You wanted her in a cat. It is only fitting that you should experience what you wished upon her." The gavel raised. Brenda stopped breathing. "On the count of filing a false police report in the first degree and the count of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, I am sentencing you to a total of 5 years in federal prison." The words hung in the air like smoke. 5 years. 5 years. Brenda shrieked, her knees finally giving out. She collapsed, catching herself on the edge of the table. "No, that's impossible. I'm not a criminal. I'm a flight attendant." "Not anymore," the judge said coldly. "Bailiffs take her into custody." As the marshals moved in, grabbing Brenda's arms with a firm, practiced grip, she looked back desperately at the gallery. She saw her husband, who had his face buried in his hands, unable to look at her. And then she saw Jordan Banks. Jordan sat in the front row, wearing a pristine white coat. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply watched with the impassive, terrifying calm of a hurricane that has already passed. It was the look of someone who had balanced the scales. The descent. The transition from first-class lead to inmate 7734 was brutal and swift. Brenda was processed at the Metropolitan Detention Center before being transferred. They took her uniform. They took her wedding ring. They took the fake pearl earrings she wore to look sophisticated. In exchange, she was given a rough orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other people's sweat. Her first night was a waking nightmare. The woman in the bunk above her was a credit card fraudster named Tasha, who laughed when Brenda tried to explain she was there by mistake. "We're all here by mistake, honey," Tasha had cackled. "Get used to the mattress. It's thinner than the patience of a saint." For the first 6 months, Brenda cried every night. The reality of hard karma wasn't a sudden strike. It was a slow, grinding erosion of her soul. She used to serve champagne to billionaires. Now she scrubbed mold off the shower tiles for 12 cents an hour. She used to look down on people for their clothes. Now she wore the same stained uniform as murderers and thieves. The hierarchy of the outside world didn't exist here. In here, Brenda wasn't the powerful gatekeeper. She was nobody. Her husband filed for divorce 3 months into her sentence. The legal fees had drained their savings, and the public shame was too much for him to bear at the country club. He took the house. He took the kids. Brenda was left with nothing but time. 1 year later. The harsh winter wind whipped through the sliding doors of the Greyhound bus terminal in rural Ohio. It was a bleak, grey place, a purgatory for people with nowhere else to go. A woman pushed a heavy-wheeled mop bucket across the cracked linoleum floor. Her hair, once dyed a defiant blonde, was now grey and pulled back into a messy bun. Her face was lined with deep grooves of exhaustion and bitterness. It was Brenda. She had been released early to a halfway house due to overcrowding and good behavior. But freedom was a loose term. She was a convicted felon on parole. Her flight attendant license was revoked for life. Her name was on every do not hire list in the corporate world. The only job she could get was as a janitor at the regional bus depot. "Miller, you missed a spot over by the vending machines." Her supervisor, a 20-year-old kid named Kyle, yelled from his office. "I'm getting it, Kyle," Brenda muttered, gripping the mop handle. Her hands were chapped and raw from the bleach. She dragged the bucket toward the waiting area. A row of plastic chairs was filled with tired travelers. Above them, a flat-screen TV was bolted to the wall, playing the midday news on a loop. Brenda usually ignored the TV, but a familiar name caught her ear. "And live from the White House, we go to the ceremony for the Medal of Distinguished Service," the news anchor announced. Brenda froze. She looked up, leaning on her mop. On the screen, the image was crisp and bright. It showed a ballroom filled with dignitaries, generals, and politicians. And there, standing at the podium next to the president, was Jordan Banks. Jordan looked magnificent. She wore a tailored dress uniform, her posture regal. On her chest, a heavy gold medal caught the light of the camera flashes. "Special Agent Jordan Banks is being honored today for her work on Project Blue Sky. The anchor's voiceover continued. This initiative launched after a high-profile incident of racial profiling on a commercial flight last year has revolutionized airport security. Agent Banks' investigation uncovered a ring of corruption and bias that resulted in the firing of over 50 airline staff and massive policy changes. Brenda felt a physical blow to her chest. 50 people fired. The airline fined millions, and it all started because Brenda couldn't just let a black woman in a hoodie sit in seat 1A. On the screen, Jordan leaned into the microphone. Her eyes were fierce, staring right through the camera lens, right into Brenda's soul. Power is not about who has the loudest voice or the fanciest title. Jordan said, her voice echoing in the dirty bus terminal. Power is about integrity. It is about treating every single person with the dignity they deserve, regardless of what they are wearing or where they come from. I accept this medal not for myself, but for everyone who has ever been underestimated, for everyone who was told they didn't belong. The applause on the TV was thunderous. Brenda stood there, mesmerized. Tears welled in her eyes, not of anger, but of a crushing, hollow regret. She had tried to destroy Jordan Banks. Instead, she had made her a legend. And in doing so, Brenda had destroyed herself. A sudden collision jarred her from her trance. A teenager with a heavy backpack rushing to catch the 2:00 p.m. bus to Cleveland had run right into her. The impact knocked the mop handle out of Brenda's hand. It clattered loudly to the floor. "Hey, watch where you're going," the kid snapped. He was wearing a hoodie. He looked tired and annoyed. Brenda's old instinct flared up. The venom rose in her throat. She wanted to scream, to demand respect, to tell him, "Do you know who I am?" But the words died on her lips. She knew exactly who she was. She was a felon. She was a janitor. She was the woman who lost everything because of her own hate. She looked at the kid. She looked at the mop on the floor. She looked at Jordan Banks, smiling on the TV screen above them. Brenda slowly bent down. Her knees popped as she knelt on the dirty linoleum. She picked up the mop. "I'm sorry," Brenda whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't look the boy in the eye. She couldn't. "My fault. I was in your way." The boy grunted, stepping around the wet floor sign without a second glance. "Yeah, whatever, just move." Brenda pulled the bucket to the side, retreating into the shadows of the corner. She dipped the mop into the grey, swirling water and continued to scrub the floor, erasing her own footprints one stroke at a time. The sound of the TV applause faded into the background, but the lesson would ring in her ears for the rest of her life. And that is exactly why you never judge a book by its cover or a passenger by their hoodie. Brenda thought she had all the power because she had a uniform, but she forgot that true power doesn't need to shout. It carries a badge in its pocket and waits for the right moment to strike. Brenda lost 5 years of her life, her marriage and her career, all because she couldn't check her prejudice at the gate. Meanwhile, Jordan Banks turned a moment of disrespect into a movement that changed the entire industry. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And I want to know your thoughts. Do you think 5 years in prison was enough for Brenda, or did she deserve more? Let me know in the comments below.